Hello there! I'm Callum and welcome to the EU in Review, where I review the Star Wars Expanded Universe as I experience it. Now, I feel like I should apologise, and this won't matter to people in the future, that I haven't been able to keep to my schedule recently. I've been quite busy and I think I put too much on my plate and wasn't able to record and get the videos out earlier, so I do want to make that up to you with some more videos this week, so it'll be good. But this time, I'm going to be talking about Tales of the Jedi, Golden Age of the Sith, which is chronologically after Dawn of the Jedi, Force War, and there's a huge gap there, but it's good. This was released in 1996, the year I was born, and it was written by Kevin J. Anderson, which is interesting to note because as I was reading the Jedi Academy trilogy again, I was noticing some things about his writing that possibly could have been better for comic books compared to the novels. But I haven't read too many of his novels, so that'll probably be a thing for when I talk about them in my own reviews. And the cover artist was Christopher Moyer, which is really cool. I love the covers of these Tales of the Jedi comics. I really like the plot because it is like the Golden Age of the Sith. I mean, I feel like almost the title shouldn't have been Golden Age of the Sith because it's sort of the Sith starting on their waning years. So the focus was interesting on that. The ideas in it I think were really good. Like they completely brought in from Dawn of the Jedi and that, because this is the first Tales of the Jedi comic that I think I might have read one or two before and seen some things about it, but the first one I really remember reading since I'm doing the review soon after reading it. And I really liked that it brought in a completely different sort of setting, themes and everything to go along with that and give it a really different feel. The tone of the comics is interesting because it's very unique to its era as well compared to other eras of Star Wars which feel quite different. And it's really cool. I enjoy it. The dialogue has changed a bit as well, so that really reflects the era. It's very much like George Lucas, I think. It's that the dialogue changes to give it a different feel, which is good, and it really suits these comics while still being in Star Wars, of course. The writing, I thought the pacing was quite good for a comic. I mean, comics feel to me like they go quick. I think I keep mentioning that every comic review. But yeah, they feel like they go quick, so I like the writing and the ideas in it, and the details are quite good in it, and I like the detail in the art as well, which the next thing is the visuals. The art I thought was really cool. There was a different illustrator, or the person that did the pencils. Art's really good and I really enjoyed it, and it's very unique to its time period. Chronologically I'm thinking with the time period there, which is cool. Dawn of the Jedi is a completely different type of art, but I think coming into Golden Age of the Sith it really shows a different era going on as well with that. And it's cool. And the colouring was nice and all that. Very bright, which is cool. It looks like some of the people look like they're very red skin toned as far as the colouring, and so I thought they could be Zeltrons first. But I think it's just the overall skin tone colour for the series. So far I haven't noticed any continuity errors with it, so that's good and all of that, but I like how Kevin J. Anderson does weave his continuity together with his books a bit, so I'll see if I notice anything a bit later on. So then that was the spoiler free section. So now we can get to some of my notes that I took as I read it. And this will be the in-depth section, of course. Issue 0. Now, Issue 0 worked as a bit of a prequel to Golden Age of the Sith. It was a setup for it, basically. And it was subtitled Conquest and Unification. And this one was penciled by Chris Gossett. It has a special thanks for Tom Veitch for his imagination in creating the ancient Star Wars universe, which is really cool. I really like that. And I really like the first page, how it has a sort of paper scroll that it's gone back to with a summary of like mentioning when it's set and giving the time scale and a summary of what's going on in that era at the time. So then what's really cool is we get to the time of Empress Teta, when she's trying to unify the system she's in that is later called the Empress Teta system. Now off the top of my head I've forgotten the other name for it now, which is silly, but yeah. It opens up with Odin which is a species that I don't recognise off the bat, but it's really cool that I think that it opens up where we don't actually see any humans. And I really like that, because then we can actually focus on a bit of more of the alien side of it, and I always think that featuring more aliens in a world like this is really cool. After looking it up, his species is a Drathos, and his master is Uru. Bye. So Uru, if you don't know, is slang in Australia for goodbye. So I always find that funny. And it looks like a brain in a jar that looks like the jar looks like a crystal sort of thing. It's sort of set in crystal with the liquids inside and whatever, which is really cool. And establishes that Odin is very scholarly in the first couple of panels, which is interesting to focus on someone like that as well. Which I was like, ooh, how's he gonna grow? There's just so much goodness in this first part. Because it also summarizes how the Sith became named, like how the Dark Jedi came to Korriban, and the Sith became what they are because of the Sith species. And this is interesting as well because it's got input from George Lucas, when Kevin J. Anderson was talking to George Lucas about the origin of the Sith. That's what he said. And also, after reading Dawn of the Jedi, how Dagon Locke ends at the end of Force War with going away and creating his sort of own sect. I think it's really cool because we can go, well, Dagon Locke must have founded the Dark Jedi. And so they're the ones that must have fought with the Jedi. Yeah. The Dark Jedi fought the Jedi at the time. And so the Jedi must have defeated Dagon Locke and his followers. And then they ended up going to Korriban, which is really cool. Because we can make that connection now, where Force War came out in like 2013, I think. So it was a lot later that we'd actually get an adventure into what this actually talked about and summarizes, even in a little bit. Would have been really cool to get more comics about that, or even novels, stories. I love the stories. There's a lot of novels in post-Return of the Jedi, but there's a lot of comics in this Old Republic era, which is why I haven't read as much of them, so I haven't known as much about Englishes. So then it goes to Arbor the Hutt, who wears a vest and a fez, which I thought was funny. It's really cool to see different ships and designs of everything. And it also shows some people profiting off of the war, which intros the family of Gavin Joy Daragon. It would have been important later in the series because the main series focuses on them. And their parents were actually going to take relief supplies. And also the conflict is leading into the last planet to become a part of the Empress Teta's empire, which is interesting. And this empire is supported by the Old Republic for whatever reason. But yeah, which I'd heard the name before for the Empress Teta system. Because I think I listened to the Dark Lords of the Sith audio drama, which is really cool. And so it's really cool to actually see the events around the unification of the Empress Teta system. And Empress Teta has Jedi advisors, so that's pretty cool. And it's sweet. I noticed between Dawn of the Jedi and Tales of the Jedi, it switched from Jedi to Jedi, which is smart. But I also don't know what species Jedi Mehmet Nadil is. Because it's all a bit like, oh, these species I don't remember reading about or seeing before. So there must be some species that sort of either evolved or died off later on. It's really cool, the outfits in these comics, because they very much seem to be based off of like the Sith Ancient Egypt type, and then also the overall outfits seem really inspired by ancient Egyptian dress, which also invokes sort of, when you look at it, a feeling of it being ancient, being older times, which is really cool. Odin immediately says that he found out about BattleNet meditation from old scrolls and stuff, which actually I'm thinking now, there must be knowledge lost in between the Jedi and the Jedi because of how he finds that in old scrolls and reading through them, but then the main body of Jedi and everything just like, oh, we didn't know about that. So, yeah, interesting there. And all their forces just jump on it without more time to go, wait, what actually is battle meditation? And to actually get the details of what it does. At least that's what it seems like in the comic, which is funny. And Mehmet is a really interesting contrast to Odin I think, because he's the warrior to Odin scholar, which I think is a really cool dynamic to put in there. And having a look at Odin skull in one part, it looks like the skulls from Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So it's quite possible that George Lucas would have looked at the comic and gone, oh yeah, the shape of that head, it looks like a really good alien shape. Let's put that in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Because Indiana Jones, if people don't know. What's really impactful is that at the end of this, Odin really feels the loss of life. And it's terrible for him, apparently. He never wants to do it again after the supply ship gets destroyed with Gavin Joy Daragon's parents in it, which leads into the main series. I like how it built into the supply ship and focus on them a bit rather than it just happening. And you don't really see the characters, so I like how it actually focused on the characters of the people in the supply ship and all that. And it ends with Arbor actually being nice. And he's a Hutt! I'm like, what? Like giving the kids, Gavin Jory, the starship held as collateral, so they had a second starship. And he held it as collateral in case something happened to the other one, because he's a starship repair facility manager. And it's a nice beginning to the run. And it's really cool at the end of the issue how they have a sneak peek at some sketches for issues 1 to 5. I really like that, it's cool. So then, issue 1, Into the Unknown. And this is, the rest of these are penciled by Dario Carrasco Jr. Now, I don't know why they had a different artist for that, but I think he did a good job as well. Overall, the art's quite good. So it's a nice intro, establishing the time frame again, and a bit different direction for the story than the last issue. So they basically just give a summary around what we're going to do. Oh yeah, it's a Koros system that becomes the Empress Teta system. I got the note here. And the narration notes that the Koros system will later be called the Empress Teta system, which is cool, because I think some of the other Tales of the Jedi comics came before, and so they put those references in for interconnectivity. And it ties into the Gavin Jory Daragon are hyperspace explorers now. Now, I didn't realise it was going to focus on them as much initially. And they're launching from a planet called Sinagar. Yeah. Vinegar and cinnamon. And it seems like they don't have much luck, since they refer to a dangerous run being worse than others they've done. Apparently. And they've been getting repairs from Arbor the Hutt. But then it notes that they have no collateral left anymore. So next time it'll go, ooh, we can't repair the ship anymore. And there's a Navigators Guild that pays for routes and assigns a risk factor to these. So this is the days when they're being hyperspace explorers. Hyper routes are not established and all that like later on. And so they have to just venture out into the unknown. And find places, find serviceable hyperspace. And then it goes to Kahor. He's a lizard person. He has much needed supplies. And he needs to take them to Golud Minor. Which he seems very reminiscent of the run in issue 0 where the parents of Gavin Jory died. And so he takes the route that Gavin Jory found that they said was dangerous And yeah, that was dangerous compared to the ones that were approved before as well. And he's just like, I'm gonna risk it. And he has an automated ship with the supplies that they need, which failed on the route because of red supergiant star causing it to explode by being too close. So the automated ship got too close to the red supergiant star and exploded. Fun times. And then or it could be is mad, and it was destroyed and wants retribution on who mapped the route, which I was a bit like, well, they did say it was dangerous, although the Explorers Guild shouldn't have really approved it, should they? Navigators Guild. And it's cool how it shows Empress Teta with the Jedi on Sinagar, announcing the consolidation of the 7 worlds. So then, now we have Empress Teta is in control of all 7 planets in the system. And Jory thinks that the 2 could have been Jedi, like the 2 of them, him and Gav, could have been Jedis. They were tested and have force potential. And I was like, oh, I guess this will be a plot point later because they mention it. And then she says about they don't have the patience for the training. I'm like, well, I know the Sith appear here. Yeah. It seems typical of them though, and how they've been acting so far, is they just go for it with no patience and checking for things. So it's cool. Mehmet Nadal mentions a carbonite mine. So I thought that was interesting. I never realized before that carbonite was a material that could be mined. And so they must use that material in the carbonite blocks to carbon freeze people and stuff. I wonder what else it's used for. Apparently it's profitable though. And then Sk has an assistant, Gorm. And apparently Gorm has sent assassins that Gav and Jory encounter, who say that they killed the leader of the Navigators Guild. Because why would they not? Because they're bad guys. And a summary of like how they got to where they can find them. And then it switches to Sk, waiting in anticipation. Speaking of them like meat as he's on the hunt. And it sounds very similar to like a Trandoshan. I'm not sure if he's meant to be a Trandoshan, but an early form of one. The art's just a bit different. But very Trandoshan-like anyway. And that is a flashback, and then it shows Sk giving the bounty hunters the targets and whatever. And it seems that they appeared to Gav and Jory. So this is a fun, interesting part, because then it seems like they appeared to Gav and Jory. It does the flashback. And then they sort of left. And then they came back to kill them in their sleep. I'm like, what? That doesn't seem to make sense. Something was missed there in the middle to explain why have they gone off and they're now just appearing to Gav and Jory again. And Jory makes a joke about dead ends when they run into one because they're running from the mercenaries. And then Gav mentions that they should have had some Jedi training. So I'm like, well, they're reinforcing it. There's definitely going to be a point later. And it's nice how Mehmet and Odin appear to protect them and keep the peace. I do quotation marks because it's like, well, keep the peace by killing people, yeah. And also they're in support of an empire. I'm like, I guess this is a good empire because she's sort of working with the Republic, but yeah. And in this fight, which I thought was cool, it shows the proto-sabers where they have the battery pack on their hip. And they have to fight like that, which is quite interesting to see and I love it. I like the design of them as well because they've got like a crystal sticking out the bottom of the lightsaber. That's cool. So it looks less refined than the more modern lightsabers that we see later in the movies. But it's interesting with Odin because he seems to have a bit of a shift. as Mehmet reminds him he didn't have to kill the guy, and he says about, and Odino says about his people being more predatory. But this is sort of in contrast to issue 0, where he's very scholarly, and after the battle he goes, oh man, this is terrible, people died, I don't want to fight. I'm like, something happened with Odino in between, and I'm gonna say, like, these are supposed to still be in 5000 BBY compared to earlier when in issue 0. So I'm saying at least like 6 months must have passed for him to change his mindset like that. And more stuff must have happened in between. Like, I guess he had to fight to secure Sinagar and the last world. Oh no, it wasn't Sinagar that was the last world, but like the last world for Empress Teta's empire there. So that must have changed him. Then Jory decides to steal back their ship, I think it's the Starbreaker 12, to do one more run and go for broke. And I'm like, great, yeah, you do that because you're not going to get in trouble later for that. And it's nice how it ends up picking random numbers and blasting away from the security forces. Pretty cool ending. I like the bit of action there with them being chased and stuff. Oh, what I also love is the letters to the editors in the back. That was cool. So issue 2 is Funeral for a Dark Lord. It opens up with the funeral of Marka Ragnos, which is really cool because this has gone straight to the ancient Sith. And it's led by Ludo Kresh. I thought I might get to read Ragnos in action, given how he's counted as one of the great Sith Lords of the time, especially since this says Golden Age of the Sith, but apparently not. I'm like, oh man, I've heard people talk about Marka Ragnos, and he's even featured in Jedi Academy and that, and yet we don't even see him in action. He's dead. So like, Dawn of the Jedi, Funeral of Marka Ragnos, I'm like, oh, why is he always dead? I want to see him in action. It'd be really cool. Anyway, and it shows Jory and Gav coming out of hyperspace above what is assumedly the same planet, which it is. And it's nice art of the planet and everything. And Naga Sato also appears as well. So there's a lot of the names and stuff that appear, like Ludo, Crash, Naga Sato, Marka Ragnos, that are all referenced in later EU material and all of that good stuff. But I never saw them before, so it's really cool to see Ludo, Crash, and Marka Ragnos in the flesh, as it is, at least. It's really cool. And it's like, it was interesting to me how all the slaves that have Sith species enslaved by the Sith, which is also the Sith species, and there's female Sith slaves that are sacrificed as Ragnos' body is burnt, and pretty much all their slave labor is the females, which is interesting because they like must have gone, oh, they're not as strong, they can be dominated by them. Right. That sounds weird when I say it, but you know what I mean. And I like the conflict between Sato and Crash, as Sato is a progressive while Crash is more of a traditionalist, and so they come to clash over their ideas and where they want to take the Sith, which is cool. And it does say it is Korriban. If I missed mentioning it earlier, it is. Sato says, by the power of my Jedi blood. And I'm like, okay, multiple things. Mixed species? So I know in SWTOR, there's a lot of stuff like, especially on the Imperial side, where there's a side quest even tests, oh, how pure are the Sith? Are the Sith losing their bloodline? Or the Sith eventually even just going to go extinct because of all the interbreeding? Possibly. And that'll be with the Dark Jedi. But I also wondered why he says Jedi blood instead of Sith blood or something like that. Because it must have been based off of, I would guess, that they call themselves the Dark Jedi first instead of Sith. And so they associate the Force sensitivity with Jedi, the name Jedi, and so they say Jedi blood. That's what I would say, probably. And it's interesting. And I like the fight between Crash and Sato for dominance, because they are fighting for who is the next Dark Lord of the Sith. Now Mark Ragnos is dead. And the fight with Force-imbued swords, which is really cool. So like my Jedi Academy playthrough near the end, where Mark Ragnos was resurrected, and then he possesses Tavion. She pulls out the sword from the staff. It's basically like that sword, and then all the Force-imbued power and stuff coming off it, which is awesome. So it's really cool to see them actually using the swords as well and fighting with each other. And then Mark Ragnos' spirit appears to intervene. I'm like, your spirit. Something must happen with his spirit. Right, he sort of just appears and then goes away to go, stop fighting. Basically. He gives a history of the Sith, which is cool. Markedly pictured are all swords, rather than any Force sabers in it. So, through the battle between the Jedi and the Jedi, they must have lost all of their Force sabers. And it says that some interbred and kept true Jedi blood. And I guess, saying Jedi blood doesn't make too much sense to me, because it's like, well, the Jedi is following a certain code, but I guess since they called themselves the Dark Jedi, they're calling it Jedi blood to associate with Force sensitivity. But it didn't make too much sense to me as I read it, so I'm thinking back, oh yeah, that must be why they called it that. Interesting, more history, and this would have all been established by George Lucas as well, talking to Kevin J. Anderson, which is awesome. Then we get, Odin gets a vision of Mark Ragnos and what's going to happen next, which is really cool. And it's funny how Arbor is talking to Empress Teta, and all he wants is to not have it go out that he extended credit. And I'm like, he's a Hutt. And he's just a nice guy. I'm like, what? Why is there a nice Hutt? What happened in his life? But yeah. He doesn't want to go with extending credit. That'll ruin my business reputation, yeah. Owen bursts in and explains his visit to Mehmet and Empress Teta, and she says she's going to Coruscant to talk to the Republic. So it seems like the Empress Teta Empire, or the Teta Empire, is part of the Republic, at least allied. And then issue 3 was actually released in 1997. The Fabric of an Empire is the subtitle for this one. It's really cool to see Zyos after only seeing it in SWTOR before, and it goes to the Sith deliberating what to do with Gavin Jory, believing them to be scouts for an invasion force. Which is really cool, because it shows some really cool machinations of Naga Sato later in influencing them to think that. And it's funny how there's a character named Simus, who's just a head in a jar. And there's a Sith with an eyepiece that looks cool. And I like some of the designs and stuff there as well. Gavin Jory are in the dungeon, basically waiting for them to see what will happen. And Simus's head has to be carried around by someone else, which is hilarious. I wrote something weird there, something that's a typoed. One of the Sith looks like a gorilla almost, which I realised afterwards were actually Masashi. But they didn't mention what they actually were. They were just like, oh, this is some Sith that looks more like it's a gorilla type one. And so the Masashi finds an artifact, I guess it will use later. And then from Naga Sato's point of view, it explains his plan to use Gavin Jory as a scapegoat to get the Sith to go to fight the Republic, which is really cool. And the artifact they picked up was an old-fashioned blaster. So the Masashi are going after this old artifact under Sato's order. And yeah, it's an old-fashioned blaster that he got. And Sato is using it to frame the Republic and cause the Sith to take action, which is really sneaky. That's really cool how he does it. And Simus happens to walk in, as I say, because someone carries him on Sato, and Sato kills Simus with the blaster, so fun times. And of course Sato goes to the dark side of Kashyyyk, which is one of the moons, I think, for his secret base or whatever. It's interesting how none of the Sith recognize the old style blaster. It's like, wait, none of you saw that before? You fools. I thought you would have known before. I like how Sato is seeing the same issues as later Sith with the interior bickering and sort of infighting, and how he's manipulating events to play into ultimately strengthening the Sith by giving them an enemy to band together and fight against, where they've grown decadent and weaker from complacency. Like, they're happy, like Ludo Crash is like, we're happy here, we can just have our gold, I love gold, and all of that stuff. Ludo Crash takes off with his faction as Nagasato has manipulated the rest into supporting him with attacking the Republic, and it has a cool panel at the end with that. Issue 4 is Pawns of a Sith Lord, and there wasn't too much extra I noticed. Actually, I should admit, I completely missed issue 4 in my notes for some strange reason. But anyway, the interesting parts in that is the symbol on Nagasato's forehead. That's the Sith Empire symbol, if I can English still, is actually from some kind of insect that goes into his mouth and then stuff squirts out of his forehead and he has a symbol then. Somehow. Rite of passage, I guess. And then a lot of this is just the interesting part of Sato manipulating Gav and Jory and all of that. And it ends with Ludo Crash about to assault Nagasato's base. Then we have issue 5, Flight of Starbreaker 12. It opens up with an attack on Nagasato's fortress by Ludo Crash, which is really cool. And the Monocle Sith has a lion. I'm like, I love that Monocle Sith. It looks cool. They do have some big turbo laser batteries to use against Crash's ship, but not that they do very much against the ship. And Jory is sent to the Republic by Nagasato herself without Gav, which is interesting, and like they're heartbroken that they got to be separated, but it's like, well, we got to survive somehow. And it's also nice we see the symbol of the Sith Empire on their buildings. Like, yeah, we're the Sith, we put the symbol on all our buildings. And there's a close-up on Sato's forehead with the symbol as well. He's very vain. Like, he looks like he's got a lot of veins running in his head and that. It's very easy to pop a vein if he gets angry, right? And it's so cheesy. Like, all of my defenses have always been on the dark side of the moon. So yeah, the dark side was his secret base and he put the decoy base on the light side. But it's cool how Sato tricks Crash like that. Monocle Sith hardly put up a fight, unfortunately. He was like a tactician. But unfortunately, they go in and kill him. It's like, oh, you should have put up more of a fight. You were cool. And the slaves are being used against them, which is clever. I like how they have this sort of back and forth and playing with that. And then it goes back to Gav, and he mentions being Nagasato's student now, which is like, something happened. The Nagasato must be manipulating him. And then also, when he finds out Jory escaped, he says at least that she's away from this awful Sith Empire. So it's like, hang on. Why go along and be a student if you think the Sith Empire is awful? What? But yeah, it also shows Sato's progressive thinking with going, well, I can take him on as a student, and then I can manipulate him and do stuff. Whereas the traditionalist would just be like, dead. And with Jory escaping, it's all part of his plan. And it's nice how it ends on a cliffhanger into the next series, where the last page shows Jory's got a tracker on the Starbreaker 12. After Sato announcing that they'll take the Republic. They'll attack the Republic and do all of that. In Tales of the Jedi, Fall of the Sith Empire. Which is cool. So I think the main thing is just the title, Golden Age of the Sith. You expect to see all the great Sith like Marco Ragnos, Ludo Crash and Nagasato all alive and in their primes. But it seems more like it leads into, well, the Fall of the Sith Empire it does lead into. And so I was like, well, was that title quite accurate? Probably not, but it was a cool title. You get to read it, right? And it was the first to go this far back, and it's the only one that's in this era, at the start of this era, 5000 BBY, where the Republic is established and all of that. So it's cool. I really enjoyed it. So what are your thoughts on this? I'm interested to see if you guys have read this as well, what your thoughts are, if you agree with me on points, or if you have some interesting insight into something else. Let me know, because I may know stuff better once I've read more of the comics as well. This has been my chronological read-through of the Dark Horse comics, so this is awesome. And I'll do my best to stay chronological, but some I may just not be able to find digitally as well to be able to read them and all of that. So that makes it easier when I say I'm reviewing the EU as I read it. So yeah, it's good. So thank you guys for watching. Don't forget you can subscribe for some more great EU content to find out when the next stuff's coming up. And I'll see you in the next video. Anyway.